Hey, it's E.B. Moss, and this is a different kind of edition of Insider InSites. It's not episode 49 quite yet. Let's call it Special 1A. I decided that I would kind of go through the archives while I'm out here in Los Angeles for Innovation Week, gathering new content for you with some pretty cool CMOs. Let's just say football. Stand by for that. In the meantime, one of my favorite episodes from about 2 years ago was with Joe Baratelli of RPA. Joe was so kind as I was developing this podcast, but more importantly, he was really smart and has some great insights about best practices for the agency world. He is the executive creative director for RPA, and he explained things like why they ban the word consumer at the agency and how they talk about people instead. Joe is Executive Vice President and Chief Creative Officer of RPA, and he's been with the agency since it launched as Rubin Postaer more than 30 years ago. So Joe has seen some things and helped evolve some things. He had some interesting projections when we recorded this back in around July of 2017, and they've held true today. So take a listen to this great Insider InSites episode from the archives, and we'll be back with fresh content next week. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, you can subscribe and please rate, review, and share this wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps. You're getting Insider InSites from MediaVillage.com. MediaVillage is the media, marketing, and ad industry's home for exclusive thought leadership with content by and about agencies and networks, digital experts, and tech providers, with villages of content focused on everything from sports media to creativity. Explore MediaVillage.com for more. And now, let's get some insights. Joe Baratelli,
Hi.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for taking the time to speak with me. I feel really fortunate that I get to sit down with someone who has one of the longest account track records, is a Super Bowl ad champion.
Well, thank you for having me. It's
Yeah.
a pleasure to meet you and be here.
I want to explain what I meant by being a Super Bowl ad champion and tell people a little bit about who you are and let you fill in the blanks. So you are EVP and Chief Creative Officer of RPA. You've worked at the agency since it launched as Rubin Postaer about 30 years ago, I think.
Yeah, that's right. 32 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've also been the agency of record for Honda for all of that time, which I think is famous as an anecdote in the ad industry now, and it's an impressive accomplishment. And you've also made, I think in the last few years, we are farmers, ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da.
That's right.
Kind of stick in all of our brains for farmers insurance. So there are a lot more serious examples I could talk about, award-winning ads, heart-wrenching PSAs. But I wanted to ask you to talk to us about some of the insights you've gained over all that time with what's now called RPA. You've probably been telling this story for 30-some years, but tell us more what it's like to have had one client for all that time and see it evolve with the changes in the industry.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great ride. I have to say that. We as an agency have really grown to service our clients, and Honda's been a big part of that all the way along. And as the industry has changed, being an independent agency, it's allowed us to do what we think is right for our clients along the way. So as things have changed and become more digital in nature and more analytics being we have resources towards, we've built up the team to be able to take advantage of those things. We built a digital discipline to service Honda, and a lot of times we'll do things to test them out a little bit with our own stuff. So we built if you think about when I got into the business, there wasn't anything there wasn't the internet, right? Gosh, we didn't even have computers yet. You know what I mean? So when people would find out about these things and be interested, and they were like, hey, what if we built a website for the agency? And then they applied that knowledge and built a website for Honda. And Honda was actually one of the first car companies to actually have a website, and we built it for them.
Wow.
So when I say, we've grown with them, it's those kinds of things. And we always try to think of, what services and what kind of, people and skill sets can we bring on board to help our clients achieve their business goals and help them grow. So it's been great. When I first started, the agency probably had about 100 people. Now we're like 700.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've really grown over the years, but it's been steady growth.
And so you've had to really identify people who had a core competency in actually things that a lot of people didn't even know about, like building a website at the time, or, someone who understands what the heck a MarTech stack is now, and so you fill in the gaps that way?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we're always looking for in people are people that are curious, because what I've discovered is we're always in a constant state of change. There isn't an end goal. Everything is always evolving, and you need to have people that are curious about what the future does hold. And I think that's what's always kept me interested, to be at the same place for 30 years. There's always something new. There's something different. There's something different in the media world, or something different in the creative side of things, or new products and new services. We try to, push things forward for our clients that way too.
Well, speaking of pushing things forward, I mean, you've had some pretty amazing innovations, and there's been a lot of news lately from you. I mean, there was how you used AirDrop, the iPhone.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
At South by.
So, we like to have a presence at South by and send people, but this year our focus was really on recruitment as we're growing and we want to attract talent. And what we've done around the South by is trying to gain some attention for the agency itself. But what we've done the last couple of years is we've opened it up to the entire agency for any ideas to help us promote ourselves. So not this year, but the year before, we actually created, it was a little bit of a contest. The team came up with an idea of having a high-fiving robot. So this little robot would, you smack it, and it would track people's likes on a website. So the team actually built the robot and figured out what the technology was going to be, and we shipped it down there, and it was riding around town, ended up on Good Morning America. It was really, really an interesting thing. So this year, our focus was on recruitment. So we sent our HR folks and our creative recruiter. And the idea was, let's try to get attention with the people we're trying to attract in an interesting way. Mm-hmm. Well, the AirDrop, you have to be in a physical proximity to be able to receive it. And it was really successful. So the idea was, if we AirDrop people, that it was basically an invitation to a concert that we sponsored. And I think the name of the band was Friendship, which ties into our People First theme.
Right.
And it was really successful, and people created a bit of a buzz, and it worked exactly as we thought it would. So it was great, and that was one of our social. She's an ACD in our social group that kind of formed the team and pulled that together. So
smart.
Yeah, but it's fun, and it's great to offer those kinds of things to people outside of just the creative department, because you never know where ideas are going to come from, right? And
Definitely.
We have the bench, I guess, and the depth to be able to pull things like that off.
Now, theoretically, you oversee all of this, so things are filtered through you. That means that you've had to stay pretty nimble and pretty adaptable to a lot of changes over the years. I mean, how do you maintain an expertise in understanding that, we're going to use Instagram instead of Snapchat for this, or we're going to use AirDrop, and that's a great idea. How do you do it, Joe?
Well, I'm not alone, right? I mean, we've got a team, a lot of smart people. I just try to stay abreast of things like, MediaVillage, right? Like just read. I'm constantly, these days you get stuff coming to you,
Yeah.
right? So if you think about, filtering things like, Flipboard or whatever.
Right.
I try to stay up on media. I try to stay up on the creative. I try to stay up on the industry, but it's mostly just about educating yourself, right? So I have a broad knowledge, but around specific things, I got to rely on everybody else on the team because they have the skill sets and the disciplines to really understand it. They're living it day to day. So I have a general knowledge and I have an intuition about what I think will be successful. But I also leave it up to the team. So I'm not a big thumbprint guy either.
Yeah.
I really have a lot of trust in the people that work for us, for sure.
Well, there was thank you for the mention of MediaVillage. We appreciate that. And Jack Myers, our chairman, actually had an interesting interview with the head of a media agency not too long ago. And this person said that he feels like media agencies should be like artists and that their canvas is everything from, whether they're buying linear or even print or digital. Mm-hmm. But he also warned that buyers have to be careful and let the creativity through.
Right.
So that the campaigns can live. And he said he was worried that data and analytics can possibly smother creativity. How do you manage that in a creative-oriented and yet full-service agency?
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in the full-service agency model. We've always been that way. That's it's interesting to see in my career to see how things have shifted and trends come and go. And I think where our advantage is and where we're most successful is when it's all together. And we talk about being able to have that knowledge all under one roof. Mm-hmm. It creates that nimbleness and it creates the thinking and trying to get everybody involved sooner in the project. So what we try to do is take the analytics, the research, the planning, the strategic side of things, and put them in the room with the creatives and talk about things, about what we're trying to do, what our goals are. I always talk about what our end goal is and then what's the best way to achieve it. Well, these days there's so many variables and there's so many layers of things that we're trying to do. It's so important that people have an understanding of that. And the best way is when all that's in one place, under one roof. And so that model works best. Now, not all of our clients are like that. Honda is now, thank goodness. We're back taking advantage of that model for them. We had a little break there for about 4 years. The creativity is so tied to these things because it's an endless supply of opportunities out there. So the more we can understand where that is and take the time to I'm not really describing it well, but there's a time factor in coming up with ideas, right? So where the disadvantage is, if it is an outside media buying and planning agency, is a lot of times we get something dropped in our lap, if you will, right? And like for example, let's say we're going to do a homepage takeover. We're going to do something on ESPN. Well, it takes a lot of you got to come up with the idea, but then there's also production time. You got to build these things. You got to create the assets. You got to put it together. The animators have to, figure out what, how it's going to work. That takes time. And if we only know that, hey, we're going to do an ESPN homepage takeover with 10 days, and it's going to take us 2 weeks, that's a real problem. And I think that's where having the media and the planning and the strategy under one roof really helps the creative side of things.
Right.
But as far as data goes, we love it. The more, the better. And what we're always looking for is a unique insight. And that's what's going to power a creative idea. That's what data offers us these days. And we have our own, we call it Research, Analytics, and Insights group. the RAI group. And, I think, well, we talk about it as data. It really is the insights that we're after. And so if you have a strong team that can take that data and figure out what that is, what that insight is, that's another thing that just helps us from a creative standpoint.
Right. We're big believers in that. And in fact, this is called Insider InSites. So that's 2 plugs you've given us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We actually also just did a story on the power of emotions and brands. And I think you also work with Southwest,
right?
Which in our recent article was the case study of, an airline standing out above the fray with the power of emotional branding. Tell me a little bit more about how you evoke emotion, and is there... It can't be a formula because you've made me cry with your PSAs too many times, or am I just a sucker?
No, you're not a sucker. I think it's what we do, right? And I talk about it a lot with folks. It's, I went to art school. If you create a painting, you want to create an emotion. It could make you happy. It could make you laugh. It could, make you cringe, But all those things are basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect with people. These days, I think the nature of advertising, because there's so much proliferation of it, and we talk about, attention deficit, that you need to be able to talk to somebody on an emotional level. We always talk about the heart and the head. It might be a rational decision, but you're going to get to that rational decision through an emotion. And brands are living things, right? And you have to take the care to make sure you get the right tone and the right feel. Southwest is very unique in how they manage their folks. In fact, they actually talk about how they're a people company. Our cultures fit quite well when we talk to them. I went into their headquarters for the final pitch, and they had some mantras on their wall. And one of them is servant management, which is what we talk about. I'm in service as a manager. I'm in service to my reports, if you will. I want to make their job better. I want to help them achieve whatever it is that they need to do. And that's Southwest's philosophy. And what that does is it allows people to be empowered to make the right decision on a human level. And that's why I think, hopefully, they never get in a situation that United was in. Like, I don't think, if you just look at it from a human level, how inhumane is that? Right? So if you empower people, and that's your philosophy, to be able to make the right decision, because we're all just individuals working with each other one-to-one, whether you're in the service industry especially, it's important. So those things kind of line up that way. So when we talk about trying to create emotion within the advertising, it's trying to capture some of those intangible things that are important to companies like that. I think Honda feels the same way about how they, treat their customers and the products they make. They really think about the individuals that are going to buy those vehicles. And I think Southwest does the same thing. So we're always trying to capture that emotion in the work that we do.
I think there have been some studies, and I don't know if you aspire to follow them, but do you think humor works better? Does pathos and tears work better? What does it depend on?
I think there's a lot of forces that come into play. Humor is definitely a powerful force, and we've seen success with that. But there's also sincerity. There's honesty. There's I talk about tone a lot. You can shout at people, or you can put your arm around them and say something soft, right? And I think those are different techniques that you use. I think it just depends on the situation at the moment too. Sometimes cultural forces play into that. What's going on in society?
So we were talking about the need to create things in a timely manner. And, you read about the classic Oreos in the dark idea, and which is kind of archaic by now, all of a couple years later. But the need for speed and to crank out content and messaging, and just like it seems with citizen journalism kind of diluting the power of the press, let's say, there are also a lot of publishers who are producing native ad campaigns. How do you compete not only on a fast turnaround like that, but with sort of the quality that you put into things versus the quantity of cranking out creative?
It's always a dilemma. I think what we do is we're staffed to be able to do that, and we have people that concentrate on those things. What we talk about, especially in social media, is the hum and the pulse. There's a hum out there that you need to be consistent with, and tell the stories that are in line with the personalities of these brands. But then being able to take the advantage of whether it's something culturally or a calendar event, and being proactive towards those things is really the key. What I talk about is trying to get out in front of these things and setting up a system. And every client's a little different, but like I said, we've got the skill sets to set up whatever we need to set up for whatever client. And it usually comes down to having the right people that have the right sensibility and understand those timing issues. But you almost have to set it up systematically to a certain degree. But you don't want to make it too much about process, because you still have to have that creative freedom to be able to, like I say, create those pulses that are really the things that kind of break through the day-to-day clutter.
And so it also has to resonate with a whole new generation of media consumers, the M word, and that generation of millennials pretty much hates ads. Probably not yours, but but how do you create really that seamless experience that they expect that'll help enhance their experience with advertising or messaging, instead of just interrupting it?
Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot, in that what we want to try to do is be accepted. So a lot of it again comes down to tone, and we want to make sure that we're talking about the brands or the messages in the appropriate manner for the media that we're in. A tweet is a lot different than a 30-second television commercial. And while we might be talking about the same thing as the end result, how you talk about it is completely different in those things. An email is different than a tweet, which is different than, a radio commercial or even a podcast, right? So what we want to do is make sure that we understand how people use those tools in their lives, and make sure that what we do is appropriate for that. So, like Instagram, as an example, we rarely put logos on those things. We've discovered, and through data and research, that those kinds of things there's certain things that are acceptable and not acceptable in these different media. So we're very conscious of that, and we try to explain that to our clients, because a lot of times it's like, well, put the logo in there or do this. Yeah. Well, that's immediately going to turn somebody off. They don't want that. But if it's an interesting story about, hey, you can take a weekend trip in this vehicle, or gosh, did you know, here's a tip for when you're looking for an apartment. Those kinds of things live in that space in people's minds. And as long as we don't violate that, what we try to do is not violate that, and that's when those are more successful. So we're looking at all those different things all the time and constantly monitoring it and advising our clients on the best way, and actually proving that certain things work better than sometimes it's kind of counterintuitive to what you would expect.
Like what?
Well, I think the Instagram example is a good one. I think I'm not the guy doing these things day to day, but I have a general idea of how you talk to somebody in those worlds. Where we as marketers are using all these tools that weren't necessarily set up. Of course, now you read all these stories about the Facebooks of the world. They're really marketing companies, and they're ad driven, and they're making a bunch of money off of that. But the consumer doesn't see it that way. These are just conversation tools, and they want to talk to their friends and family on these places. So we need to treat the brands as friends and family when we insert ourselves into those worlds, if you will.
Good point.
But we've all used social media, and all of a sudden an ad pops up, and you're like, you don't want to deal with that. You're not in that space to do it. Now, television is a different matter because it's been around for 50 years, and people know that, hey, if I want to watch this TV show for free, I'm going to have to see some ads. Now, if I pay for it, maybe I don't need to, right? It's more accepted. And so that's when I talk about trying to be accepted, that's what we're trying to do. And so that's what we found is the most effective, is just making sure that we talk about things in the right place. But to just put a logo in there isn't going to be as effective as a story. So I think that's probably the best example. And
the whole skip-proof thing. I mean, YouTube TV has disabled skipping the 30-second ad, which really raises the bar to avoid the annoyance factor and help you, I guess, collect the data, which will inform your next round of creative, unless you just run it by your teenagers at home as your as your focus group of two. But.
Yeah, we don't do that, but they're pretty harsh critics. Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's going to be better for everybody, right? We don't. I mean, as a consumer, I shouldn't even. We've decided to ban the word consumer. As a person. I mean, it's just internally we think that
us as them, us versus them.
Yeah, and how impersonal is that? I mean, we're just people going through our lives. Yeah, we might like something and need to buy something or those kinds of things, but consumer, so we've made a conscious effort within the agency to ban the word. So, but I find myself saying it because that's the vernacular we use as marketers. But just as a person going through my daily life, I don't want to look at the 30-second ad any more than anybody else does. And I'm always looking to wait. As soon as that skip button comes on, I click it too. But I think from a creativity standpoint and from a messaging standpoint, I think it'll be better for everybody, including our clients, because now we will not just automatically, and I'm not saying we do this, I'm talking about the industry as a whole, kind of what we were talking about before. It's important to be accepted and to be in the right, have the right tone for the media that somebody's taking in. So a 30-second ad before you watch another 30-second video, it just isn't fair, right? So if they, and what I read, and I don't know whether like I said, I'm not the expert, but I think they're talking about like 6 seconds, right? So that'll be an interesting challenge, but we've also found that people's attention, and especially as the younger generations are more digitally native, the attention span is getting shorter and shorter.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we can't, be effective in getting our messages out there either. I was at an interesting conference just the last couple of days. One of the keynotes, they talked about this, and they talked about how just the difference between what a desktop version of the experience versus how you scroll through a mobile device, and how fast you scroll through a mobile device. People are taking things in literally in less than 2 seconds. Wow. So, now we need to start thinking about, okay, what is it? And visuals are going to be more important. They also put up it was interesting, they did a little experiment for the audience, and they flashed, I think it was like 5 or 6 different images. They were very graphic images. But the audience was able to identify all the brands and things. But one of them was even like it was Target, maybe that was the Coca-Cola kind of wave, the Nike swoosh. But one of them was a silhouette of Princess Leia. And everybody was able to identify that with literally like a half a second. So I think where things are going is they're more visual, and we've seen that over the last few years.
Right.
Being kind of iconic in your visuals is very important. But it's also important around, like you mentioned, the farmers' mnemonic.
Yes.
Those kinds of things, and I talk to our clients about that, are very effective. Being able to identify that in someone's mind is key to having a successful, long-standing campaign.
Yes. So sight and sound really having an impact on our recall, and I can't wait for smell-o-vision next.
I think John Waters tried that once, right? Back in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the rocking seats in the cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's coming back too. So you talked about a through line and having to continue the message throughout whatever tactic or platform you're using. Is there an example? I mean, you have done such amazingly creative work from, stop action to your use of social media, even teasing the Super Bowl ad on Twitter before anybody else did. Talk to me a little bit about an example where you've maintained a through line. Name names.
Well, it's interesting. There's farmers is a pretty good example.
Yeah.
Like when they came to us with a really interesting dilemma. They would run ads, and State Farm would get the credit. Like that's not a good situation to be in, right? What the real issue was is they were just generic, going straight to what you think the solution is. Like, we'll get you back to where you belong after, something bad happens. And I think for years that was kind of the message of the whole industry from the insurance industry. And what we need to do is we needed to separate them from everybody else. Well, there are certain things that you can do. And like I talk about, we talk about icons a lot, but it has to be rooted in something truthful to the company, truthful to how they operate. When we did the initial research with them, they actually have a world-class training program for their agents. It's an agent-based company. So, and it's called the University of Farmers. It's a real school that all their agents go through. And so we took that as our unique insight to separate them from all the other insurance companies. Okay, so now how can we make that entertaining? Well, what if we materialize that university? Well, there are certain things, right? There's the bell, there's the song.
The professor.
Yes, and the professor. And so that is what everything that we do for them goes through that lens. And they've really adopted it internally for their own employees, not only the agents, but the employees at the corporate offices, and even to the golf tournament that they sponsor. They have a university day where they encourage the golfers to dress in their college colors, and the fans do too. And it's really great. They have the little University of Farmers at all the tee boxes. We actually set up a Hall of Claims there in physical space, so the golf fans can stroll through that. So those are the kinds of things that we try to build. We try to build the universes. We were talking about comic books before,
right? And
creating a universe for our clients in a language that everybody kind of adopts and looks through it. And when it's really successful like that, it's very powerful.
So let's kind of play that all the way through then. So there's phenomenal creative with a through line across all of these platforms, and then to use data and, buy media. How do you deal with the media sellers who are knocking on your door to get you to place that business, and what considerations? And then I'll ask you to talk about what advice you have for media sellers who come knocking at your door wanting that business.
We always talk about what the end result is. So if you have that vision of what our goals are and what we agree to with our clients to try to achieve it, then you find the tools and you plug it in that way. I don't think any of our planners would go like just open the door to somebody, and it has to be right for what we're trying to do, right? So I think we're and believe me, I'm not the media expert, right? But we have some really smart people that can look at the big picture, and they're looking at it from holistically. It's almost like building a portfolio for just the way we talk about diversification when we're building our financial portfolios. It's the same kind of thing that we're trying to do for our clients, in that, hey, you know what? Our research says that this audience, and we talk about audiences a lot. We refer to our media group at the agency as our audience investment group. Because what we're trying to do is find the audiences that are going to be most effective to our clients' growth. So what we're trying to do is like, okay, how can we reach those folks? Well, they're on Twitter, or they're watching certain types of shows, or they're into some new technology that maybe somebody is bringing. So all of it is research based, and we figure that stuff out, and then we figure out what those tools are to help us reach those people.
So very symbiotic, and again, using that word insights across it all.
Yeah.
Excellent. So just to wrap it up, what's next? What do you see on the horizon? What are you anxious? What sandbox are you anxious to play in?
Wow, that's a good question. It's also additive. I think like we always talk about, television was going to be the death of radio, and the internet's going to be the death of television, and, Twitter is going to replace, news. And none of that's happened, right? It's always been something that has built onto it. Now, we've, as, people living in the world, we have to absorb all that. But I think it's just going to be more. I think there's going to be new things. I think the biggest thing that two things that are on my mind. One is about forcing the cross-discipline teams to work together sooner, and we found that really helps us figure these things out. If you put the media planner and the designer and the writer and, the UX person together on a team to solve what these problems are, we can get there a lot faster and have a lot less friction within the agency itself. So that's something that we're championing. I think the other thing is programmatic design. There's so many versions,
all of the above.
All of the above. That it takes a lot of effort from people, just physical labor, right? Well, now there's tools that can help us do that. Like, say for Southwest per se, we've got a bunch of different sizes of ads. We also have different cities, different rates that change. There's tools out there that can help if you set up the format right. Well, basically, and I'm simplifying this, and I'm probably not doing a very good job explaining
Simplifying works for me. That's good.
Well, basically, you set up the parameters, and then the computer will find the audience and find the right images, if you have different images that are appropriate to the people you're trying to talk to. So, if we're doing something in Atlanta, it's different than what we're doing in Chicago, right? So it's kind of trying to find the right tools to help us automate that manpower, if you will.
And that takes us back into having the man or woman power with ad tech, with MarTech, with all of that. And so populating RPA with more people and Plans for conquering the world soon.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully.
Excellent.
in a good, friendly way.
In a good, friendly way with people first.
Yes, exactly.
Joe Baratelli, thank you so much for joining me. This was illuminating and lots of great insights.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm E.B. Moss for Insider InSites. You've been listening to Insider InSites from MediaVillage, with thanks to Hanger Studios and today's guest, Joe Baratelli of RPA. For more insights and thought leadership, visit MediaVillage.com. I'm E.B. Moss.